lot of things I like to grow in my garden, but probably my three favorite things would have to be cucumbers, corn, and beans. And perfect time to get our beans planted. Soil's finally starting to warm up. And once that soil is warm and we're past chance of frost, great time to get your beans planted. Now, I've got a couple different types of beans that we're going to plant. And for a bush bean, the big difference between bush bean and pole beans is the bush beans will produce a bunch all at once. Usually takes about 50 or 60 days. Once they start producing, they'll produce for about 2 weeks. Just a lot of beans coming on all at once. And then depending on which variety you do, they'll come on again. They'll put like another big flush of beans on, so you can get a couple pickings, but they do take a break in between crops. And so if you're bottling, bush beans are really nice because they'll kind of all come on at once. You can get all your bottling done. You can still eat some of the beans, but they're really productive over a short period of time. Where pole beans, once they start producing, they will produce consistently for weeks, sometimes months. If they start coming on middle of July, they'll go until it freezes in early October, and they'll just keep producing and producing and producing until you get sick of them and stop. But the nice thing about bush beans is if you're really doing a lot of bottling or freezing, they'll just keep, you don't have to, they don't keep going. You just like gather them all up, bottle them, freeze them, get them going. But with the pole beans, you just get a little crop all the time. So we're gonna plant bush beans right here. This is called Jade. This is like my favorite variety of bush beans. Very productive. It's got some really nice long skinny beans. And with the bush beans, I like to do about 1 seed every inch. So before we put the seed in, I've got a little furrow dug here. It's about 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches deep. And in the bottom, we're going to put a little bit of fertilizer. So we're going to use our organic tomato and vegetable food from Job's. There's a lot of really great ones out there. I love the Happy Frog. Fertilome tomato and vegetable food's awesome. This is an all organic one. Decided to go with the organic version. Lots of beneficial microbes, microorganisms, mycorrhiza in there to really get the plants going when they get going. And we'll just like sprinkle a little bit of that fertilizer right down the row, and it will feed them as they come up. It's very slow release, so it's not gonna burn them. Usually about a cup of the fertilizer will do about a 10-foot row. So a cup will cover about 10 feet of a row of, say, carrots or beans or beets or whatever it is that you're gonna be planting. And with our bush beans, are usually about 1 seed every inch. And so I'm gonna plant them just a little bit heavier because I like them a little thicker, but generally about 1 seed every inch. And these have been treated with a fungicide so that they will germinate better if it turns cool and wet again, like it can sometimes in the spring. And we're just gonna continue to sprinkle those out. All right. Then, once you get those beans in there, we're gonna take our hoe. You can use a rake, either way will work great. And then we're just gonna cover those up. Just about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of soil right over the top of those. And I like my rows straight, so I use some stakes with some string. You don't have to do that, but I'm a little more particular in my garden. I like the rows to be nice and straight. And I try and give plenty of room in between my rows so that if the weeds start coming up, I can run the tiller up and down the rows. So I go about 3.5 or 4 feet between rows. Once I get the beans planted, I like to step on them just lightly. So I'll just kind of compact them down just a little bit. So right where we've covered those up, we're just going to step on them just lightly enough to just compact them down. Now that they're compacted, they are ready for a soaker hose. And we can just take our soaker hose right here, run the soaker hose right down the row of beans. And I'll soak them once about every 3 or 4 days until they come up with the soaker hose right over the top of them. And the soaker hose just slowly drips water out, hydrates those seeds up, and beans are quick. Usually 4 or 5 days, we'll have beans popping up out of the ground, no problem. So soaker hose is a great way to control the water. You're gonna end up using 70% less water than you would with a sprinkler, but it's going to be very effective because it's going right down into the root zone of whatever plant we're putting it down, whether it's carrots or potatoes or corn or beans. It's going to deliver that water right into the root zone. Plants are going to be able to pick it up and utilize it better, but you're going to use 70% less water to do the same job as you would with a sprinkler. So great way. Bush beans, excellent way to do it. If you want to do pole beans, there's a lot of different ways to do pole beans. So with the pole beans, you can either put big stakes up and run some string or some twine. You can do field fencing. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but we want something that's gonna like hold the strength of the beans, because they're gonna get 6 to 8 feet tall. So you want really tall stakes. Some of my customers will even make teepees out of poles like these. So you can sink the poles into the ground and just kind of join them up like a teepee. And then once you get your teepee built, or your tripod, whatever we want to call it, we'd secure it up at the top so it would have a little bit more stability. And then once we get our tripod put together, then we take some twine and run the twine all the way around the tripod, starting at the bottom or starting at the top, whichever way you want to go, and just barber pull it all the way up to the top. It gives the bean something to crawl on, and the tripods actually work really well for a small amount of pole beans. Doesn't take up a whole lot of space. As you can see, it takes up about 2 square feet, but you can get a whole lot of pole beans growing on there. So what we would do is, same planting technique. We put one seed every 2 to 3 inches all the way around our tripod. We'd have beans coming up. They just grab onto the twine. They just grow right up the top. Super easy to do pole beans as well too. So between the bush beans and planting pole beans, either on a tripod like this, or on a full fence, if you want to use cattle panel, if you want to use a nylon netting, that would work great. Just make sure that your structure is strong enough that it's going to hold the weight of the beans, because as the beans grow and they get 6 to 8 feet tall, they're going to be pretty heavy, and they're going to pull your fencing down. They're going to pull your netting down. So make sure it's really well secured, because as they start to produce beans, they get really, really heavy, and they'll produce beans all summer long until it freezes. So whether you're doing bush beans or whether you're doing pole beans, make sure you get that fertilizer down in there with the beans so it'll feed them throughout the year. Usually 2 applications will work great for the beans. Lasts about 60 to 75 days. And soak them. Water them really well. Soaker hoses work great, and make sure you have the right structure to support your beans if you're going to go with pole beans, and you'll be super successful planting beans and harvesting all summer long.